So Joel Kotkin writes for Forbes magazine. I believe we've had him on a couple of times. He covers demographic, social, and economic trends around the world. And every so often he writes an analysis of where California is going. And he's very clear-eyed. So these are not political statements that he's making.
Yeah, no, he's not. You can't nail him down as it's being right-wing, left-wing, or anything. And he writes, as its economy started to recover in 2010, progressives began to hail California as a kind of Scandinavia on the Pacific, a place where liberal programs produce prosperity. The state's recovery has won plaudits from respected figures, including Harold Meyerson and the New York Times' Paul Krugman. Governor Jerry Brown and Bill Maher's assessment took a broken state and fixed it.
Oh, in a comedian's assessment. That's good. Well, Bill Maher says so. It must be true, right?
He takes himself as very seriously. I actually watched his show live one time, and, he believes he's a game changer.
Yeah. I say he's a good comedian, but sit down.
Well, sometimes when he spouts on serious issues, he does have a Trump way of just laying it out there, sometimes crudely.
Right. But he doesn't know as much as he thinks he knows. And I think that's the point of this Joel Kotkin article, is that California is on the edge of a big bust. And the people who tell you things are going great, they don't know as much as they think they know. Because, and this is stuff that we've talked about at length, he says California's job growth since 2010 has outperformed the national average, but it's propelled largely by the tech-driven Bay Area. If you go back to 2001, California's job growth rate is less than half of Texas. And with 10 million fewer residents, Texas has created almost 3 million jobs in the last 15 years. Only 2 million in California. And again, a lot of them are tech jobs. And I think the theme of this article is there are areas of the state that are doing exceedingly well, mostly tech.
Yeah, good old Silicon Valley.
And it covers up enormous areas that are doing very, very badly.
Like Southern California.
Yeah, which has a lot less tech.
He actually writes, outside the Bay Area where tech is weaker, the situation is grim in Orange County. The strongest Southern California economy. Tech and information employment is lower today than it was in 2000. In L.A., employment has declined in higher wage sectors like tech, durable goods, manufacturing, and construction, and has been replaced by lower wage jobs in hospitality, health, and education.
If you're a tech genius, you're going to do great. If you're not, the jobs being created don't pay well. They just flat out don't pay well. So when you hear politicians talk about jobs created, there's two tricks here. One is, well, from what date are they counting? If you count from 2001, we're doing only half as well as Texas. Secondly, how much are the jobs paying? And a lot of these new jobs outside of tech pay crap. These aren't good jobs. Now, you have so much wealth being created by the tech people that they're paying an unbelievable percentage of the taxes, especially income tax.
This is an amazing stat. Just 5,745 taxpayers earning $5 million or more generated more than $10 billion of income taxes in 2013, or about 19% of the state's total. And again, the income tax is the largest thing they take in Sacramento.
Think about that.
So we've got a few thousand people responsible for almost 20% of it. 5,700
people, 20% of the income tax that
What
comes
happens
in?
if they move, they die, or everything goes south in the economy and they don't have that kind of...
Because a lot of that comes from the inflated stock market.
Yes.
And eventually this stock market tech bubble is going to pop just like the last one did. The thing is, all these wealthy tech people, it's papering over all the other problems. California is now home to 30% of the U.S. welfare recipients. 30%.
No, we always said about a third.
And when you factor in the cost of living, 25% of Californians are in poverty. Of course, much of that was imported from other countries. You got a quarter of the state in poverty, 30% of the state getting welfare benefits. The middle class is shrinking most rapidly. So you're left with the wealthy tech area, running from Silicon Valley up to San Francisco, and maybe the west side of L.A. and pockets of Orange County. And then there's a ton of poverty and not much middle class in between.
No, and there's fears that Silicon Valley is definitely already peaked. There's talk that there are clear signs of slowing, layoffs increasing earlier this year, more companies looking for space in less expensive, highly regulated areas. Again, that's a problem with California. It's not a good place to do business. And if things start to slow down, even in your tech companies, they're going to start thinking about, well, maybe we don't need to be here anymore.
Not only we got 30% of the welfare cases, we got 20% of the homeless in this country.
Yeah, the nation's homeless, 20% are here. And again, California, I think, is it 12% of the country's population generally? Isn't that the figure that California is?
Yeah.
Something like
12%. Yeah. So
we got 20% of the homeless.
Jerry Brown is already forecasting big budget deficits the year he leaves office.
Thanks.
There's something called the Mercatus Center. They rank California 44th out of 50 in terms of fiscal condition, 46th in long-term solvency, 47th in terms of cash needed to cover short-term liabilities.
And Kotkin writes, relieved over concerns in the short-run budget. And you know what? He didn't even mention. You and I have talked about the long-term debt and all of the money that's going to be owed to the retirees from those pension deals. He writes, the rise in revenues has provided a pretext for Brown to push his campaign to fight climate change to extremes. New legislation backed by the governor is going to impose more stringent regulations on greenhouse gas emissions, mandating a 40% cut from 1990 levels by 2030. And we covered this lunacy last week with them going after the dairy industry, didn't we?
He said Jerry Brown's greenhouse gas policies will by themselves have no demonstrable impact on climate change. And Brown knows this. He's counting on setting an example that other states and countries will follow. So Kotkin is saying Brown knows this has no effect on the atmosphere. He wants to start a movement, except nobody's followed. No other state, no other country. It says that industries and people have simply moved elsewhere, usually to places where the climate and there are less stringent regulations allow for greater emissions. So it's exactly what was predicted 10 years ago, that industries will get up and leave and take the jobs with them. And who does it hurt the most? Those are middle-class jobs and blue-collar jobs that are now leaving the state.
Yeah, he points out in his statistics the demise of California's real middle class.
Environmental regulations has led to a virtual ban on suburban homes. We always told you that. He is at war with the suburban lifestyle. They're driving housing prices up. Mandates for renewable energy are driving up energy prices. This hits hardest at traditionally higher-paying blue-collar employment in housing, manufacturing, warehousing, and agriculture. So he's slowly ruining the economic base of the state because of his greenhouse gas obsession. He's papered over the budget issues, which are huge, because they jacked up the taxes on the wealthy. But there's an enormous amount of poverty in the state, a dramatically shrinking middle class, jobs leaving by the droves and being replaced with cheap jobs. And he's out of office in about 2.5 years.
Yeah, 2.5 years. All right, we have an election coming up in 2 years. All right, more coming up.
John and Ken Show, KFI. But Bill Maher thinks things are going fine. Heather Jordan is news.